Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden. Magic Psychic Training 10. In the theoretic part of this course, I alluded to the notion of God, and the magician who has made appreciable progress in his development can start on the meditation of this concept of God. Before he begins to work through this last chapter of his development, he has to examine whether or not he is already mastering the psychical training of all the previous steps, whether he has accomplished the magic balance and ennobled his psychic personality to such a degree that the Godhead can live in it. Many religions are talking about the practical connection with God, giving expression to the personal point of view that this connection can be established already by addressing God in the form of a prayer, of adoration, or of giving thanks to God. The magician, of course, who has trod the stony path of development up to here, is not at all satisfied with a statement like this. God is, for the magician, the highest, all the most true, the most lawful concept that exists. For this particular reason, right at the beginning of his initiation, the magician learnt to respect this lawfulness regarding the universal laws, and he did observe it, since the conception of God has to be interpreted as an outcome of this universal lawfulness. Whichever may be the spiritual group the would-be magician belongs to, he may be a Christian, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Mohammedan, a Hindu, a Brahmin, or whatever be his creed or his path to initiation. He has to respect this universal lawfulness in his conception of God without exception. The Christian will worship our Lord Jesus Christ as his highest ideal, attributing to him the four fundamental qualities or basic aspects which are manifest in the omnipresence. These four fundamental qualities are omnipotence, wisdom or omniscience, all love or charity, and immortality. The magician will not regard his Christ as a manifestation endowed with one quality only, but regarding the universal laws in analogy to the four elements, he will revere him as the highest divinity. The same may be applied to the followers of Buddhism or any other religion, provided the magician does work correctly after having matured in magic. He will establish his God principle on these four fundaments with their basic qualities corresponding to the elements. And these four fundamental aspects of his deity will represent his highest conception of God. The concept of his God has not to be linked to any person living or having lived. It can be also expressed in a symbolic way. Fundamentally, it is absolutely the same thing, whether the magician does think of Christ, Buddha, a Devi, a sun, a light, or a flame as being a symbol of his supreme Godhead. It is not the imagination that matters here, but the quality he does impute to this imagination. In any case, to a magician of whatever religious faith or ideology, the imagination of God has to be the highest, the dearest, the most precious, and the most venerable of all things above which there cannot be any kind of super-God. The communication with his God can be effected by the magician in four different ways. 1. In the mystical passive manner. 2. In the magic active manner. 3. In the concrete manner. And 4. In the abstract manner. The true magician ought to be master of all these four methods, and it is left to him which of them he will choose for his future permanent connection. The mystical, passive manner of unity with God is a privilege granted to most of the saints and all the believers to whom the divine principle manifested itself somehow in ecstasy. As the magician does not know in which form God will manifest himself to him, the kind of manifestation will be expressed according to his religious faith. In the instance of a Christian, this may happen in the form of a symbol such as a white dove for the Holy Spirit, in the person of Christ himself, or in the shape of a cross. All this is, however, of secondary importance. The main point is the quality of the divinity which manifests itself to the respective person. How strong and pervasive this manifestation of God to the individual will be depends entirely on the measure of his mental and psychical maturity. This kind of manifestation will be experienced by all persons in whom a state of bodily rapture or ecstasy has been produced by deep meditation or by prayers. All the mystics, theosophists, bhakti yogis, etc. regard this kind of manifestation of God as the attainment of their aims. As history offers so numerous instances of this mystic unity with Christ God, I deem it superfluous to dwell on minute details. The second kind of revelation of God is the magic active one. Peculiar to most of the magicians, the well-trained magician will try to come near or in touch with his deity by invocation. This kind too may be spoken of as a form of ecstasy, which, however, in contrast to the previously described concomitant manifestation, is being produced deliberately, step by step. In this kind of manifestation, the interior, that is, the spiritual part of the magician, rises up to God halfway, and the latter comes to meet him halfway down. This invocation of the deity in the magic active manner is a theurgic or a real magic form which a magician is allowed to use only when he has gained the right measure of maturity. The manner of invocation is absolutely individual because there does not exist any concrete method. The mystical passive as well as the magic active invocation of God can again be carried out in a concrete or an abstract form. The concrete invocation imagines God in a certain shape, whereas the abstract invocation is based on the imagination of the abstract idea of the divine qualities. The practice of the possible divine revelations is very simple. Supposing the magician is meditating in the Akasha principle, that is, in a state of trance, about his God and his qualities, and when the expected symbol of God makes its appearance during this meditation, then one can speak of a mystical, passive kind of revelation. But when the magician, with the help of his plastic meditation, whether outside or inside of himself, does invoke the single qualities of his deity, regardless of his imagining these qualities in a concrete or an abstract form, then it all turns out to be a magical active invocation of God. He whose development has reached this point can attain not only to the mystic passive, but also to the magic active union with God. I myself prefer the methods of the concrete and abstract forms which can be managed by every magician. An excellent exercise preliminary to the concrete manifestation of the deity is to put a picture, a figure, or any symbol of the respective deity in front of oneself. The magician is sitting in his asana posture, staring intensively at the picture, staring intensively at the picture until an effigy of his God will appear before his closed eyes. While staring at the picture of the Godhead the magician is worshipping, he can again perceive it afterwards on any white surface nearby. This visualization of the Godhead is an excellent prelude, allowing the magician to make the image of God appear before him. The preliminary step is to be repeated until the magician is capable to imagine his deity as being alive at any time, in any position, at any place, without the slightest effort. Then he can, Then he can combine the picture he did imagine with the corresponding divine qualities. At first, he will not at once succeed in coordinating all the 4 divine fundamental qualities he has been meditating about in the previous step with the picture of his imagination. He will, therefore, concentrate on one quality after the other. The concretization of the divine quality in the imagined picture is very important and has to be repeated so many times until the magician's deity can be actually perceived by him as endowed with the 4 fundamental qualities. If the magician did achieve this, he must imagine the object of his adoration not as a mere picture, but as a living being, acting, irradiating with such an intensity as if his personal God were standing real and alive in front of him. This is the so-called concrete union with the Godhead outside the own self. The more frequently the magician is following this method, the stronger and the more effective will be the visual and sensuous deity before him. When he feels to have put all he knows about God's conception and realization into the object, in brackets, picture, of his invocation, then he may think of his living deity, which appears before his eyes with all the brilliance of the 4 basic qualities, as filling and entering his body, thus occupying the place of his soul. This has to be repeated by the magician until he feels the Godhead so strong in himself that, losing his personal consciousness, he gets the sensation as if he himself were the deity he had imagined. By frequently repeating this union with the Godhead, the magician adopts the qualities condensed in his imagination. And now it is no more the personal self that is acting through him, but his Godhead is doing so. Thus he is experiencing the concrete union with God, union with his personal God, and it is no more his consciousness, his soul, or his spirit, but the manifestation of God's Spirit that is speaking through his mouth. Here the magician is uniting himself with his God, becoming God himself, for the time of the duration of this unity, sharing all the basic qualities of the Godhead he is united with. The method of concreted union with God is of utmost importance for the magic practice, since a magician ought to be able to contact any Godhead whatever, irrespective of the creed, in this manner. In theurgy, as well as in the conjuring magic, this practice is indispensable, as it is the only way for the magician to bring about this union with a Godhead at any time, forcing the lower beings to execute his will. It is evident that, in this manner, a magician can unite himself with the God principle to such an extent that all the properties and powers indwelling the concreted Godhead he is psychically united with become peculiar to him too, and continue, as it were, being his qualities, even though severed from the imagination. Such divine qualities are called by the adepts magic capacities or powers or siddhis. If the magician masters the performance of the concrete union with his Godhead, he is going to realize the abstract form of the unity with God. In the beginning, he may link the conception of God to an auxiliary conception such as light or fire, but later on he must refrain from doing so, projecting nothing else but the quality first outside, then inside of the own self. Now, the aspect of the divine quality has to be connected to the organ corresponding to the elements in a manner that, for example, omnipotence is, in the abstract, experienced in the head or love in the heart. By repeating this exercise frequently, one becomes identified with the abstract idea of God to such a degree that there is no need of any imagination of a region or of a part of the body. Next, the four basic qualities can be combined into one idea which permits the introspection of the highest form of our conception of God. By repetitions, God's manifestation is deepened so much that one feels oneself God. So deep must this unity with God that, so deep must be this unity with God that, during the meditation, there is no God, neither within myself nor without, subject and object being molten into one another, so that there is nothing but I am God, or as the Indian in his Vedas puts it, Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art. Arrived at this stage, the magician has completed his magical development in the astral form, and any further exercises will serve the purpose to deepen his meditations and to strengthen his godliness. Franz Barden's Initiation into Hermetics.